What is your view of success now today versus maybe what I'm guessing like 30 plus years ago, your version of success was, did I eat lunch? Did I even eat?
When you grow up in a place where the upward mobility is not really in the cards, it's very different. But I had this bug, right? Like I loved America from afar. It's like a different parallel universe, okay?
Well, welcome to the podcast today. My name is Jason Tonioli, and I have a special guest with me, Christian Ray Flores. As we were talking earlier, Christian, you are the type of person that does a whole lot of things. You're a high performance coach, you're an entrepreneur, international recording artist, musician, philanthropist. I know you've done a lot of really amazing things to help people. I know you've got a nonprofit in Africa. You did some amazing things in Ukraine, which that's just amazing to do that. But your story has kind of intrigued me. You started out life in Chile, and then you moved to Eastern Europe, and now you're here. You're living in Austin, Texas now. So I don't even know how to introduce. You've got so many different things. So welcome, and I'm super excited to chat and share your story with people. I think it's going to inspire a lot of people.
Honored to be here, Jason. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Christian, let's maybe just dive in. I know, so you speak 4 languages. You started in Chile. I think let's just start out with kind of sharing your journey of how in the world does one go from Chile to Eastern Europe to, just give us that journey that you've been on and where you're at today.
So I'm in Chile. My parents decided to settle there. My dad's Chilean. That's why they met in college, actually, in Russia. My mom was Russian. So they moved to Chile, and then we're there. And I'm 5 years old, and my parents are Marxist, both of them. And they like second generation, third generation Marxists, like real Marxists. And they there was a coup in Chile. So the socialist president that was actually democratically elected was overthrown by this military group. And then they proceed to arrest tens of thousands of people, put them in secret prisons, concentration camps. People get disappeared, killed, tortured, by the thousands. So my dad was one of those people. So he was in a concentration camp, and my mom was in hiding with me and my little sister. I was 5 years old. And he was lucky because they released him and didn't, he was also lucky because he got into a refugee facility that was actually not widely available for people because the military could pursue you anywhere they wanted to. But there was a couple of places that the United Nations had a deal with the government that it was there for expats. My mom was an expat. So my dad got into the refugee facility and protected from the military because of her. So we spent a few months there, and it's scary, and there's a bunch of families there, and we got asylum in Germany in Munich, and we went there for a while. Then we went to Russia for a while. It was awful. We're talking poverty, like on the level of communal apartment, that kind of thing, right? And then my dad got a contract, an offer in Africa, in Mozambique, right after they got their independence from Portugal. So we go there.
How old were you when that happened?
7 years old. So,
Wow.
so by age 7, I have moved to 4 different countries on 3 continents. And that was sort of the beginning, right? It was pretty crazy, and I was, it was just a shock for me. My dad tells me I was silent for a year, like socially. I didn't want to talk to people because I was confused. So, and then a year in, there was a civil war that started. So and it was mostly in the bush, but we had bombings in the city, that kind of thing. So that's sort of the backstory. By age 9, I'd already learned 4 languages because of those things, moving. And when I was a teenager, my parents got divorced, so there was another blow, and we had to go back to the Soviet Union, Russia, at the worst times, right? Like the whole thing was basically crumbling. So we go from a tropical place to a very cold place, one bedroom apartment. I slept in the kitchen for a few years, starting over basically, and raised by a single mom. So that was and then all of it changed after college, and that's where music sort of enters the scene in a major way.
So you're in Russia all through your teenage years then.
Yeah.
Then. And so for college, where did you end up going to school?
So I went to a international university called Friendship University, and I got a degree in economics, a master's degree in economics, and that was basically everybody expected me to go to in banking and trade or international trade or academia. All my friends went there, and I was very musical my whole life, and I sang, I break danced when I was a teenager, so I was massively, massively invested in performance in general. I had a great voice and had this exposure to this very international sort of influences musically. So, and then somebody told me you should do something with that professionally. And I mean, it's one of those things. A friend told me that, and when he said that, it's one of those things where you've never considered it even as a possibility, and just because somebody mentioned it, it's almost like they gave you permission to dare to dream something like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, so that's how it sort of showed up.
I see I think I see it more and more the older I get, how people just let themselves be held back because they feel like they need permission to be great and or do the thing.
Yeah.
I was, in The Wizard of Oz, if you remember, at the end of I think it's the lion gets a medal from the wizard, if you remember in the old
Uh
Wizard of
huh.
Oz, and all of a sudden, like, the wizard gives the cowardly lion permission to be brave all of a sudden, or, you've got I think it's the
Yeah.
scarecrow that gets the diploma, and all of a sudden, because you have this stupid piece of paper, you're given permission to be smart now, and it's like, you were smart, and I think the whole point of that movie is you were great before
That's
anybody
right. Yeah.
gave you the medal or gave you the stupid diploma that you had to pay and, suffer through, and I'm not dissing on school or anything else, but I see far too many people hold themselves back, especially in the music side, because they don't think they're good enough, or they have this imposter syndrome that they just don't think they're as good as they really are.
And also it's I think it's just objective fear, right? It's look, the odds of success in the music business are smaller than the odds of success with somebody with a master's in economics when it comes to but what is success at the end of the day then, right? Is stability the ultimate success or a growth in the career ladder? Is it worth maybe risking? Those are the big questions usually.
Right. Well, and as I've interviewed, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of people on this podcast, it's I think one of the most interesting things that I've been able to just get different perspectives on is what do you view as success? I mean, you've come from like ultimate poverty, Marxist socialism. Like, I mean, you've experienced pretty much the low. I mean, I haven't met anybody actually in person like this that had somebody in the family in a concentration camp. Essentially, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
hard to get much lower than that.
yeah.
And I'm curious to what is your view of success now today versus maybe I'm guessing like 30 plus years ago, your version of success was, did I eat lunch? Did I even eat? Probably sometimes, right?
Yeah, it was just really subsistence really are we okay, basically, right? Because when you grow up in a place where the upward mobility is not really in the cards, so to say, it's very different. But I had this bug, right? And I had a I loved America from afar. I mean, I wrote a book about it, Little Book of Big Reasons to Love America. You can go check it out on Amazon. Because I was getting this almost like this frequency, this signal. Even when we were in Africa, we would watch these shows that were American shows, and I go, it's like a different parallel universe. Okay, what I'm human, they're human, they're living a very different life, and so I would get those things, and then of course because I spoke the languages and I read a bunch of books, I became almost like a learner of the sort of free enterprise part. Of course, what also helps is that I was studying economics, so I could study the economic theory behind socialism and Marxism, and then the economic theory behind capitalism and free market enterprise. So I had sort of these almost like theoretical underpinning as well, and then at the same time I had visceral, real life, immersive experience of what the socialist system brought, and I wanted out. I want nothing to do with it. basically. So it puts a fire in you when you have that kind of scarcity and lack of opportunity. And you become either you just comply and then you become a victim, an perpetual victim of the system,
Mhm.
or you become a rebel against the system. And I became a rebel against the system. And
Interesting.
so I had that fire in me.
Well, and I'm curious from your perspective. I mean, I don't I've actually never talked politics on this, and I don't wanna talk politics, but just from a theory of the socialism, I mean, you came from 2 different locations and you've studied it on the macroeconomic level. I'm just curious to know what, you know, what do you think are some of the things that need to be avoided or people need to be aware of when it comes to kind of that philosophy of life or how government should run? And I'm just curious, again, not getting any political anything, but you've
Right.
you've lived it.
And the book that I wrote is actually not political. The idea of the book is that I try to sort of show people as an outsider's perspective, the immigrant's perspective, and to show them that it's really not necessarily even about people just wake up and decide they're going to have a system. It's not that simple. That's why nation building never worked and never will work. It's culture, right? And culture is mystical, is magical. It's luck. It's built over centuries. So the how America was seeded culturally, from the beginning, where the kind of people that went there here, and it was sort of the either the desperate or the bold, the people that didn't want to comply to their status quo, all the way to the freedom of religion and faith and free speech and the self-governance, the freedom to choose, these layers and layers and layers where mistakes are not punished or vilified, but they're actually applauded because that's the spirit of America, all the way to how you can read in the founding documents, the pursuit of happiness is almost like the pulse, the DNA of the nation. So there's all these layers: charity, philanthropy, um, this acceptance of immigrants. So there's not. It's the most accepting place on earth. You know, so there's layers and layers. So it's almost like this constellation of things that came together here in the United States, and then it creates the most prosperous nation on earth, the most free nation on earth. And so that's basically the idea, right? And the socialism piece you asked, it's actually not super complicated because it's not really a system, it's a theory, you know, and a theory hasn't been proven yet. It hasn't really proved ever in the history of humanity to bring prosperity and freedom and equality to people. It just never has. So the theory is beautiful, and that's why it appeals to people mostly, that are younger because it's so idealistic. But the solution has never worked. Actually, never. No one has ever proven it to be a successful experiment. And when people say, "Oh, the Nordic countries," no, they don't have socialism. They have much more social sort of benefits, and the taxes are much higher, but it's not socialism. So
Yeah.
and it ends up always being oppressive and violent, always.
And do you see, I'm just curious from a do you see seeds of that? I mean, I know with probably on both sides, they like to point fingers and call each other and say, "Oh, you're trying to be socialist," or whatever. I'm
Yeah.
curious, do you see seeds of what you've experienced and studied? Are parts of that happening, I guess, in
Yeah, they are. And so every chapter of my book, there's a little bit of a warning. I'm like, hey, you need to watch out for this. you know. So every chapter ends with that. Hey, I think we need to pay attention. This is actually not good for the country. you know.
Right.
So yeah, I see a lot of that. I do.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, tell me a little bit more about the music side, since this is a music podcast as well. So when you started doing the music, and realizing, oh my gosh, I should go for this. Give us that story.
It was basically, it was just I was like, you know what, I can live in a shoebox. I'm single. I'm gonna regret it for the rest of my life if I don't try. So I was, but I was also very lucky, and I did have sort of almost like the secret sauce, right? I was lucky because the Soviet Union literally collapsed right before my eyes. I saw the tanks in the streets, attempted coups, all of that stuff, right? And then it became suddenly the most free marketplace on earth because there's literally no rules. The whole infrastructure, the whole system collapses. So there's the new hasn't come yet. So it's like the Wild West, right? Of free enterprise. And and even then, I was my friends. Many of my friends became wealthy overnight during those times. Especially if you have a degree in economics, you can probably do that more easily. And but I still wanted to do music. It just grabbed my soul, right? And I wanted to, so I choreographed, and I got a break. I basically didn't have anything to show for my talents. And at the time, there's no home recordings available. You have to just be in a studio to record something even worth releasing. And so I would just hang out with musicians. I'll be in the entourage, in the vicinity, in the orbit. And I would go to these parties or after parties, and I would just hang out, and I would just try to just be around them, right? And then one of those after parties, somebody comes over, this short guy, and he goes, "Are you like an artist or something?" Because I mean, I fake it till I make it, right? I look the
Mhm.
part. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I have a studio. And there was like, at the time, this was post-Soviet. It was maybe 3 studios in the whole city. So it's like the golden ticket, right? And he goes, if I give you some night hours to experiment and give you access to my studio, what would you do with that? And I said, I'd record some demos. He goes, okay, well, who's going to write the music? I'll write the music. Who'll write the lyrics? I'll write the lyrics. All right, well, call me and we set something up. And I've never written music or lyrics in my life right before that. So I went home and started writing music, and then I showed him the music, and he liked it actually. And then we looked for a producer, a music arranger, and he gave me a guy who was almost always high, didn't get the stuff. I went to find my own guy, and I was literally I would say, look, you see the landscape is this. It's like post-Soviet pop. I want to do R&B pop, and I would put him music, like give him CDs, and we'll play. And I said, "You see the beat with Bobby Brown, for example, or TLC, or Prince. Do you see this? Do you see that?" And I said, "This is the thing. This is the thing. I want this. I don't want any of the stuff that exists. I want something distinct." And so he'll start coming over. We rented an apartment together, and we would like work on beats and arrangements. And they're usually really bad in the beginning, and then they got better. And so I wrote a few songs, and we arranged them. We record them in the studio, and then I was like, okay, I have that mindset of distinctiveness, right? So I'm a good dancer. I can choreograph if I can find some other dancers. So the problem is that it's the Soviet Union. There's no like there's nothing there. But I was part of this breakdancing underground, and it was literally underground. We trained underground,
You had the
Uh,
ballet dancers, and that was about it that were up above
Yeah, at the
ground then,
time,
eh?
yeah, ballet dancers didn't fit my thing, right? So I found break dancers, like street dancers, and I put them in a rehearsal room, and I would choreograph something. They've never choreographed anything for a show, so I would teach them how to dance what they do, but in a much more show business, sort of much more polish. So I'd choreograph all the numbers and everything, and I would train with them 4 or 5 days a week for 3, 4 hours a day for probably 6 months before we could show it to anybody. But it was impeccable. It was basically nothing. No one has ever seen anything like it. And we went and we auditioned. We had like 4 songs, you know, auditioned at a local club, and there was like maybe 4 of them in the whole city at the time, right? And there was like the biggest, the hottest, like all of the elite was there, and we auditioned there, and they hired us on the spot to work like 4 nights in a week, and that's what we did. And so so there was this. It's luck. It's a lot of hard work. It's distinctiveness. Like we developed a signature sound right away, and then by the end of the year, we had 3 record contracts offered to us. The bidding war.
Hmm, amazing. And then, so with that, I mean, did you sign with a label, and then I mean,
I
you
did,
ended
yeah.
up you're in Austin, Texas now. You're not in Russia anymore, so
I'm not. Well, we did. I did about a decade of that, and you can't see it, but I have a wall here, and framed. I have one, two, three, four, 5 albums that I released during that period of time, and we sold millions of albums, and we went from small clubs to medium venues to sports arenas. Like all over across 15 different countries, all of the post-Soviet space. We, had endorsement deals with Adidas, with Guess, with Head and Shoulders.
Wow.
So it's like the full blown thing, right? Press, video, radio, magazines, newspapers at the time still. And then one day I'm going on tour and I become very restless. I'm alone in this train car. I think the entourage, everybody was like somewhere in the dining room car or something. I was alone with a cup of tea. And I sort of had this very scary thought. It's like, is this all there is for me? That was sort of the idea. And basically I realized like there's like a whisper of the soul that, I'm gonna be so bored with this if I do it for the next 20 years. I'm sort of done. I don't like this because there's dimensions of me that are not activated. So I'm going all over this sort of post-Soviet space, but I speak 4 different languages. I have a master's degree in economics. I want to do something. I would do something entrepreneurial. I want to do philanthropy. Um, as an artist, I realized by then that what I write in the next maybe 5 years maximum, I was maybe 5 years before that active, is going to be the only music my fans will want to hear after that. So I will be, because I already knew so many of those artists, my age and then older, were my friends now, that I would play probably big venues for 20, 30 years. It's a very, you can make a living for a long time in music, especially if you establish yourself and you have a fan base that sort of grows up with you. But they don't want to hear anything new you wrote. And I couldn't see myself going on stage and having 5 new songs and no one wants to hear them, you know? So that was a depressive thought. So basically that was sort of the beginning of the transition. And I just went home and I said to my management group and my managers and my partners and my crew, hey, I'm going to transition out, so it took me like 3 years to transition out. Super scary, obviously.
Did you transition? Did they bring in a new singer for all the music and somebody else gets to
No,
sing all those songs, or you just kinda wound it down and
I just wound it down because I was the guy. It wasn't a band, it was me. And we produced another band. That did happen. That we produced a girl band. It was like a Spice Girls type project that we started together with my 2 co-producers, and they basically just switched their investment and time and energy into this girl band, and that band went massive, just massive. So, in one of the cost of me leaving is I had to give up my claim to that girl band, my share. And, that cost me like 15 million or something like that, you know? That was
ouch.
painful. That was painful.
Well, that's amazing. So when you left it, I mean, what year would have that been roughly?
Probably '03 I left,
2003?
yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. And then did you, just you left Russia or you came to what
Yeah,
happened then?
we moved to the States. Po Another thing that happened sort of in that transition period is that we realized that my wife couldn't stay in a cold climate because she has autoimmune issues. And I just couldn't see I mean, she would just not do well for 20 years. Like, it was a non-starter.
And she
And
was she Russian or did you
No, she's American. So
she's
she's from
American?
Wisconsin, ironically, but, the cold is horrible for her. So, I'm like, "Look, you left," and she left everything to be with me. Like, she was working in LA. She used to work for MTV, VH1, Universal Music. She sold everything to move to Russia in the '90s, okay, to be with me. Had her children there. So she left her world for me. So I basically said, "Look, if I'm gonna leave my world for you," and that's it. So we moved to the States, and we decided to move only to places that have no snow, and then I started the first 3 years, 3.5 years, I did philanthropy, because I was very interested in that, and I got an offer to be director for Latin America for this big charity. We had projects in 9 different countries. And then I went and we did ministry. I became a Christian while I was at the height of my career, actually, We did some ministry, and at the same time started a production company for music and music videos in Hollywood for Eastern European artists, and that was awesome. That was fantastic. I mean, it was just one of those things. If I hadn't left that previous career, I would have never been able to be friends with some of my idols. Like, I was working with icons that I used to listen to their music or watch their music videos.
Mhm.
You know, like they directed Britney Spears or Bobby Brown or Michael Jackson or whatever, and then I was hiring them to do my projects. It was insane, you know. I was hanging out with George Duke, who was a jazz legend, you know, and I was friends, literally personal friends with the guy in the Hollywood Hills, hanging out at his studio. I was working with, oh, this is another interesting story. Um, I I remember in when I was in high school in the Soviet Union, I would just doodle and I would like draw things in my notebook. I'm pretty ADHD, so like I couldn't pay attention, and I would draw these logos of brands that to me represented freedom and I don't know, success, abundance. And I would draw Adidas. I liked Adidas. I liked Nike. I like the logo for Kiss.
Mhm.
And, that there's, like Michael Jackson used to have a logo with, like, you know, like him standing on his toes, you know,
Mhm.
like the pants and everything. So I'd write those things just fantasizing, this is daydreaming, right? And, what really strikes me as fascinating, the things that I drew, right? And at the time, there was 0 possibility of me ever living or being in contact with those realities, right? 0. And then a few years later, still in Russia, I had an endorsement deal with Adidas. My poster was in every Adidas store in the country.
Wow.
It's just, you know, crazy. Or I would, I had endorsements with Guess and Head and Shoulders, and I was like, doing all these things. And then when I moved to the States, I was like, okay, that life is over. No one here cares who I am. And oh, and before I went, sorry, I'm gonna go back a bit. I was very much into philanthropy, so we did this big project for orphans, like thousands of orphans, and I would perform and bring all my celebrity friends, and we'd do this massive thing. And one of the years, Michael Jackson was coming to town, and I said to my buddy, who was the head of the charity that I was working with, uh, "What if we time this big festivity, the thing that we do for orphans every year, to around the concert? Maybe reach out to his people. Who knows? I mean, it's a Hail Mary." He shows up.
No kidding.
He shows up at the event, loves it. I'm like, you know, like, obviously we're virtual, but I'm like this close to him, like I'm talking to you,
Yep.
right? And, it's just the most surreal feeling to be able to organize something that attracts the idol of your musical idol, right? And then a few years later, fast forward, I was in LA working on a full album for a rock band from Eastern Europe, producing it in the studio of Kiss, being produced by the producer who produced arguably one of the best albums for Kiss, Psycho Circus. And I was hiring one of the former Kiss band's guitar players to do a solo for me. Like, that's how things transpired, you know? You know, so pretty crazy stuff.
Wow. That's crazy. So if you could rewind rewind the clock 20 or 25 years or so back, um, and give yourself advice, what advice would you have for yourself? I mean, because you've kind of lived that dream that I think most people never even achieve that level of, we'll call it, financial and fame and, whatever success you want to call it. I'm just curious, what advice would you give yourself then? And if you could.
I would probably say, "Hey, good job doing something that most people wouldn't dare to do." But, um, you know, find a inner confidence. Don't seek validation from the outside. Don't compete with people. Compete with yourself. The minute you start competing with other people, you feel insecure about yourself because there's all kinds of really good people out there doing really amazing stuff. And one of my regrets is that I was so, you know, sort of in the flow of this incredible success that started comparing myself to my these are my friends. These are people that are my buddies, right? Who are rising at the same time. And I didn't collaborate with them enough, you know? I did a couple of duets here and there, but I'm looking at it now going, "You're an idiot. Like, why didn't you write songs with them? Why didn't you produce albums for them and they produce albums for you? Why didn't you create something just fascinating collaborations?" That's one advice. The other one is that for some reason, I it got in my head that, I wanna be just the artist, and I don't want to involve myself deeply in the business side of things. Although I have the degree and everything, I have the capability, but it's really more of a mindset, right? And I stayed away from the business side of things, although I was perfectly capable of doing it. And that was a big mistake, and I think many artists sort of feel that their artistry is almost like diminished if they're become really involved in the business side of things. And I think that's a huge mistake. And it was my mistake as well, where I think I could have done much, much better financially. Not that I wasn't doing bad, I was doing fine, but it's almost like there's an art to the business side. And I didn't see it that way, you know? I saw it as something that is less than for me. And that was just dumb. So now I find it to be beautiful and creative to be a business guy. And like if I had that switched that on, I think it would have like it's even hard to imagine what would have happened.
Yeah. So the 2 point, the collaborations and then the business, and I totally it's so funny because I think artists that we talk like the really successful artists find that little business.
Yeah,
They aren't
absolutely.
scared of it. I don't think any of us feel like, "Oh, I'm this business or marketing guy." I mean, because the creative but I do feel like a lot of people that maybe struggle or haven't found, we'll call it the financial success, they do shy away from that,
Mhm.
business or just even learning it. It's almost like they're offended by the idea of
It's
even learning a little bit about what's
it's an
going on.
yeah, there's an arrogance there, I think. I really do.
Yeah.
And
What
I think I was definitely arrogant.
what I'm just curious, I mean, because you're way more of a business guy than most of the people I've interviewed on here. What specific pieces of, you say, I wish I would have learned the business. What are those two or three or four bullet point things that you're like, man, I wish I would have studied or learned about or applied, because you came from macroeconomics, like you were
Yeah.
like full on going to be
I mean,
bankified.
some things I did do well. For example, as opposed to most artists in those times, I retained full ownership of my intellectual property, which was a
Yep.
rarity at the time, right? When we had sort of our first opportunities to be signed to a label, there was a bidding war, and we negotiated really well. Between the labels, they sort of would pitted them against each other, that kind of thing, right? So we did some of those things did come in handy quite a bit, right? I would say if I were to think, okay, what are the maybe two, three things that I would have done differently? I would have just been personally involved in every business discussion and negotiation we made. Because we made some amazing partnerships with brands, with TV stations, for example. And I would just get my hands dirty in the business models, inventing perhaps collaborations or deals that would be a win-win that no one was exploiting at the time. I'm a very creative, imaginative guy. I just didn't apply that to that place. That's sort of the second that's one thing. The other is the collaborations, co-authorships, co-publishing. I I was more than capable, I just didn't bother to create my own record label, and I
Yep.
should have, you know? We did really well with producing other bands. For example, that girl band that we produced, like, it was an epic thing, and we did imagine it really well. So we picked, like, 5 girls who could dance and, sing a little bit, and, uh, and they would spin off a solo career. So it's now 2 units generating revenue. Then it would spin off another solo career and replace these 2 girls. And it's like it literally continued wave after wave for years after I left the project. So part of me was going, "Man, that was a missed opportunity," right? So, but, I guess that was the price I paid, right, for being free.
Yeah. I the creative partnerships, I love what you're saying there. I think there's a lot of opportunities, I've been on the business side. I was in the business side, corporate side for more than more than a decade, and I think whether it be an ad agency world or even just you're talking Adidas, these big brands, but even the smaller brands, I think there's this aura of, hey, this creator or this artist isn't willing to do the business wants to, the company or the corporate entity wants to do something awesome, but
Yeah.
they don't know how to tell the artist, boy, it'd be really cool if you could come. Maybe it's a meet and greet with clients. I remember when I was at the bank, John Schmidt from the Piano Guys, you probably never heard of him, but amazing artist. But we would bring him, and we'd sponsor his concert and bring our clients out, and he'd sell tickets. But we'd help him off. We as a partnership, we offset a lot of the costs and the risk that he had in doing a concert, which he loved. And we just said, hey, can you come for like 15, 20 minutes before the concert? We're having this little meet and greet. You can come get a sandwich or, a little dessert or something where we're going to, the clients are all going to be, meet and greet, and just come play the piano for 5 minutes for everybody and say hello. And they'll, it's just like this elevated thing that, normally you wouldn't think, oh, the artist would be willing to do this. But frankly, in a lot of ways, I think artists don't realize
Oh,
how
absolutely.
exciting, like, that's fun for the artist. Like, it's so honestly, in some cases, I'd prefer to do the small little mini show like that over doing a big venue because you can actually connect with somebody and have a human, like, experience together.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Artists, and that's the thing is, look, if you're an artist, you have an imagination, you can create. Just treat business as an art, and it will be an amazing thing. It really so there's a ton of that I could have done. I just chose not to. It's really interesting,
Yeah.
right?
But I think the longer I've been around the music business and really uh, just last week, I had the opportunity of being with half of the RSL Major League Soccer team at a hospital. And, it's one of those where the longer you're around, the more you realize that these people that we put up on a pedestal, these famous people, they're humans just like us. They
Yeah,
want
yeah.
connection. And I think as artists, you don't want to be that person that's untouchable. I mean, and you're not. Like, we all have feelings, we have emotions, but I think as artists, I think we could do a lot better job of, look at those opportunities. It might even, maybe it's not a corporate thing. I mean, I'm thinking of like independent artists. I just had a situation where I was pulling up my website and looking at just music sales, and I have somebody who's spent over $400 on sheet music with me. And I looked at that and I'm like, oh my gosh, I should just pick up the phone and call this person and say thank you. And it would probably just floor them that that I knew who they were and that I would be willing to do that. But I think there's opportunities as artists or creators to say thank you and recognize those people that have been there along the journey with us,
Yeah.
and doing that little thing that probably takes me 5 minutes for a phone call. It'll probably be the highlight of my day if I get that person on the phone.
Yeah.
And I think as artists, though, looking for those potential collaborations, those opportunities to, even if it's just saying thank you on Facebook. I think another example is you're talking about putting these groups together that you were able to recreate and do the same thing. I mean, you look backwards to Taylor Swift's career, and she's out on MySpace or Facebook and Instagram. She's sending personal stuff out to fans, and you look at her growth, but I think a lot of her success is attributed to the fact that she did connect with the fans. And I think there's something to be learned from that at not only the fan level, the corporate level, but just as a human being level to be more satisfied and happy in life, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah. And I think for me, for example, the way I did it at the time was I did these work with these orphans, and it was not just the show, and they loved. They literally would send me letters, emails, years out. They were grown ups, and they were like, "Hey, I look forward to this thing that you did every year."
Yeah.
And not only did we do that, but I would go. Me and my wife, we would go into this one specific orphanage because we wanted continuity, and we'd just hang out with these kids for like hours. And and it was just magical, to feel something so real and to touch a life. of people that are they're invisible, in those societies.
Yeah.
That are it's pretty powerful stuff, right? So that's what got me hooked on this idea of always remembering the poor, always remembering those who don't have, and that's not an option to not do it anymore. So for me, I never stopped since then, basically.
And I don't think you realize the difference that each person can make. I mean, a big name artist going into that orphanage, I mean, you're telling me that there's letters you're getting from people. I mean, my guess is that kid, it was the first time they believed in themselves. Like they realized, oh my gosh, I can do it. It can be okay. I mean, the motivation I think that you can plant in people is incredible. I mean, speaking of last week, so my son just went in for a surgery. It was a planned surgery. He got 2 metal bars put in his chest. I mean, it's a very painful surgery. I've never, and with 4 kids, I've never been in the parent seat in a hospital situation where, okay, my kid just went into surgery for 3.5 hours and came out. And what was so interesting with this is as I was waiting for him in surgery, I found out that this soccer team, that's the big Major League Soccer team, was going to be at the hospital that day, 2 hours after his surgery. And I thought, "Oh my gosh," and he's like this super fan, like, he knows all the players, like, over the top
Wow.
super fan, which is crazy, and I'm just like, "Oh, man, he's not gonna be feeling well." He's coming out of, the being under the I mean, he's literally got slices across his chest and not supposed to be even getting out of bed for a full day at least, even if it's just to go to the bathroom, and he came out of the surgery, and he's starting to wake up, and I told him, I said, "Hey, RSL's gonna be here," and the motive, like, I've it's crazy. Um, so he's trying to go to like, he needs to sleep, like, that's what he's supposed to be doing, and he's like, I'm gonna go see him." Like,
Mm,
"What?
wow.
You're not gonna go see these kids, like, hooked up to IVs, and you're not even, like, half like, you're loopy still," and so as we were getting wheeled to his room he was gonna be in, it was, like, just after 1 o'clock, when we're starting. I think it was 1:30 maybe when we were getting wheeled to his room, and he's literally just supposed to sleep for the next 24 hours, and he's like, "No, I'm not going to sleep, I'm gonna go meet the players." And so that we come in, and I'm just like with the nurse joking with her, like, "Yeah, he says he's gonna go meet these players." And she's like, you're probably not getting up." And like literally he would not go to sleep. He says, "I'm going, like, I want to go see these players." And we got to 3 o'clock when they were supposed to be there, and he's like, "Can I go down and meet the players?" And she's like, I've been here 23 years doing this as a nurse." And she said, "I've never seen anybody get out of bed." She's like, "The best I've ever seen is by bedtime, sometimes I can convince a teenage girl to get out of bed and go to the bathroom before, instead of peeing into a bedpan." And he said, "I've never had a boy actually get up and wanna do anything within, like, 24 hours." Like, next day, I'm, like, fighting you to get out of bed, and Ryan's like, "Well, I'm gonna go do this." So, what's crazy is he literally at 3 o'clock, he's like, "Can I do it?" And she's like, "Well, okay." And she says, "You cannot get out of your wheelchair. You can't do this." And what's crazy is, and she's like, he's gonna probably be throwing up, and you've got to be really careful with him, but I guess I'll let you go down the hall and meet these guys." So this
Right.
kid out of surgery, like an hour and 50 minutes outside of surgery,
Oh my
we push
gosh.
him down to meet these players, and what's so funny is he starts interacting with them, and that motivation that I mean, it was wild to me to see when somebody had a why and a motivation to do something, what the body and somebody was able to do. I mean, I got
That's
to witness a
remarkable.
miracle happen, and, like, he literally hung out for almost an hour and a half with these guys. He
Mhm.
threw up twice in front of his heroes, which was
Oh
I'm
my
not
gosh,
when
he
I still
did.
gonna
Wow.
like, laugh about it, like, he's in the middle of talking, he's like, "Barf bag, bro," you know? But, it made me realize is if we as artists or, like, the famous person or whatever we wanna call it, if we had any idea the impact we could have on somebody, that a 23 never happened in 23 years, we could get somebody up out of bed to do something, we would do that every day of our life if we could have those opportunities. I think for me, the takeaway from all of this, I love what you're doing with the orphans, but as artists, And just even if you're just a normal guy, find those opportunities to serve somebody and make a difference, and I don't think we realize how big of impact we can actually have, whether you're famous or not famous. So
Yeah, and also it changes you, right?
oh,
I mean,
totally.
especially when when you are consistent with it, you get out of it as much as the person you're serving as well, you know? So that really stayed with me forever, actually. You know, like I never stopped. We just switched what we would do. And then, the latest thing is we started this academy. I was joking, me and you and I were laughing about how you can literally start a business and then get distracted by something else and let the business sort of flatline, and that was one of my things is I remember growing up in Mozambique, and it's one of the poorest countries in the world. So it's about, I want to say 70% of the population today lives on under $2 a day today, which is shameful to be honest with you. And then, so I took my family to Maputo, the capital, and I would, first it was just my wife, and then a friend of mine, Brandon, and we would go and I'd say, hey, here's where I grew up, and it was like a nice house and everything. But in the slums, all around the city, there's all these people that basically come from the rural areas because it's even in the slums, they can make more money than they would make out there, somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And it's like corrugated steel, dirt floors or cement floors, that kind of thing. No indoor plumbing. And it's just plagued with, I mean, it's plagued with all kinds of dysfunction. Like these kids don't really have two parents in the house most of the time. A percentage of the population is HIV AIDS positive. Like it's layers and layers and I mean, they don't have a chance. So I basically said, look, what if we bring just a group of kids, a small group from a local school. We select them well, and we give them 4 or 5 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week, almost like a second home. They can come to a place where there's air conditioning. They don't know air conditioning. Where they have a meal, they have a uniform. They feel just their self esteem shows raises, and they are mentored by actual middle class professionals who basically their main goal is to say, you can be like me. And they would just hang out with them. And they would learn English, computer literacy, and character development, like, and that was sort of the idea. And so we started it, and we started from nothing, from nothing. I just started sharing with people, and we didn't even have the money. And some friends like, okay, I'll give you some money. And it's been going for now 5 years, so um, yeah, but it's just one of those things where it's very impractical, and from one side of if you look at it from that standpoint, it's distracting from other things. But it gives you so much joy and meaning and significance that you like can't not do it. So that's sort of my the way why I do it basically.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. I man, got so many ideas going through my head right now of ways we could help people with just I love your story. It's been amazing kind of talking through this and sharing. If I guess any last words of advice that you have? I mean, you shared some amazing points for people, but when it comes to success, what I'm curious what you define as success today now, um, versus I'm just curious what do you consider a successful person or even a successful musician?
Well, I think it's really like a a work full that is sort of full of impact, the sense of, and it doesn't have to be massive, right? But impact. I'm changing something. It's not just a job. It's not just a paycheck, right?
Yeah,
I think that's when we treat. I don't know how it happened in the West, in America specifically, that work is just a job. I think that's just one of the most destructive ways to live you can possibly live, because you spend literally your most creative hours of the day, 8 hours a day. You do something that has no meaning for you. It's just a paycheck.
yeah,
So to me, success is a job or a work, a vocation. It's probably a better word. It's a calling that is full of impact. Um, a a family full of love. And that's the thing that gets really, really um, suffers the most for people who are high performance types like me. I was that guy basically, right? And so we over invest in the outer game, in the skills and the things that gets the praise, the raise, the respect, the status, the fame, whatever. And we underinvest in the character that's supposed to drive this thing and the impact it could have. So we underinvest in friendships, in love, in family, in parenting, in is the spiritual dimension that gives you peace and clarity about life. We underinvest in those things. So very, very, very talented people, they just pursue something, and then they can't even pursue it well because all these pieces that make them human, these things are not developed. They're underdeveloped in them, right? And that's why part of the reason why I do coaching now is because when I was at the peak of my career, I was clinically depressed because of that. And somebody came in, I met this guy who was this Canadian missionary, and I saw his family, his life, the way he lived and who he was. And I basically said, "Can you please teach me how to be like you?" And when he did, and I paid attention, I was very, very coachable. Everything changed for me. So all those pieces that were missing, they came into place like pieces of a mosaic. And to me, that's what makes me a successful person. It's all of that together, basically.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. You've dropped all kinds of gold nuggets throughout. I hope this has been really impactful for people. I've learned a ton. Feel like I've made a new friend.
Oh
Um,
man, thanks, Jason.
Christian, if people want to check out more about you, where should they go? I know you've got exponential.life is
Mm.
your site. You do coaching. I mean, you've got a lot of things going on, but where should they go specifically if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so a couple places. One is exponential.life. Exponential is spelled without the E, starts with an X. And on there, you can just learn what I do for coaching, and maybe that's a good fit for you, maybe it's not. But there's a really cool tool there. It's called the Exponential Radar. And it's an assessment of like 40 questions, about 5 minutes, that really measures essentially the most important aspects of your life in how you are. Where are you doing well and what needs more work, basically. So it's a really cool assessment. Highly recommend taking it. The second place is my newsletter. I drop 2 newsletters a week. ChristianRayFlores.com is the URL, just my name. And I basically focus it's on success and significance specifically, that combination. I think success without significance doesn't work in the long run. And success fueled by significance actually becomes higher levels of success and deeper levels of success. So basically that's what we do. It's very practical. 2 times a week, we drop something there.
That's amazing. Well, Christian, thank you so much for taking time to share. And I know there's going to be several people that are going to benefit from hearing not only your story, but just the advice. I think it's an incredible journey. It's so good to hear somebody be as humble. Having accomplished what you're doing, it just makes me realize, wow, there's a lot of great people out there in the world doing good things. So thank you for all that you're doing to make an impact.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Hey, it's Jason here, and I hope you've gotten a lot of value out of this episode. Be sure to check out our show notes to learn more about our guest today. And if you'd like to support our podcast, there's a few things that you can do to help us grow. First, if you hit subscribe, it will help ensure that you don't miss a future episode. Second, if you'll share it with your friends on social media or send it via email or message, it helps us spread the word as well. And third, if you'll leave an honest review, it really helps with the algorithms so that other people can find our podcast. Finding success and fulfillment in the music industry is possible, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode.